My name is Leela Morgan. I am 32, working as a financial analyst, and I never imagined waking up to betrayal that cuts deeper than any loss I have faced. The kind that makes your stomach twist and your mind race. This morning I found a letter from my father's lawyer, the kind you do not want to open but cannot resist. It stated that my inheritance is blocked, not because of debt or legal dispute, but because my marriage with David was never registered. My heart dropped, the world blurred. I could not breathe. I always thought love and truth would protect me. I did not think bureaucracy could erase what we shared. My father, a man who once held my hand at my graduation, now seemed a stranger who used technicalities to punish me. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling the sting of tears that refused to fall. The house around me felt like a cage, the walls whispering memories of my childhood. Every birthday, every holiday, suddenly meaningless. I wanted to scream but no sound came. David tried to console me, but even his calm voice seemed fragile against the weight of this storm. I kept thinking about the sacrifices I made, the sleepless nights, the years I dedicated to a family business I had hoped to inherit. The betrayal was not just legal, it was personal. It was as if all my effort and love were invisible. I walked through my apartment, staring at the framed photos of my father, wondering when he turned from protector to obstacle. I remembered the fights we had, trivial at the time, yet perhaps they were signs. I am not a weak woman, I am resilient, but this feels like a labyrinth with no exit, the lawyer's words echoed. They said that without official proof, my claim is void. That even my memories and dedication hold no weight in the eyes of law. I felt rage, sadness, disbelief, a cocktail too strong to digest. I thought about confronting him, or hiring another lawyer, but I am aware that anger can cloud judgment. I need a plan. A way to prove not just that I deserve this inheritance, but that love and loyalty cannot be erased by papers. My mind races through scenarios, conversations, evidence I never considered important. Every corner of my life becomes potential proof. The clock ticks loudly, reminding me that time is moving and opportunities vanish. And then the doorbell rings. I freeze, my heart skipping. I do not know if it is David with a solution, my father with another threat, or someone else entirely. I stand frozen, the letter still in my hand, realizing that everything can change in a single moment. My inheritance, my love, my future, it is all hanging by a thread, and as I step toward the door, a mix of fear and determination fills me, because I know this is not just about money, it is about justice and proving that the bonds we build cannot be ignored. The answer may lie behind this door, and the next steps will define me. I breathe in, open the door slowly, and I am ready to face whatever is waiting. Remember to subscribe to the channel to follow every twist of my journey. After the shock of the lawyer's letter settled into a dull ache, I started reflecting on the people around me, the ones I thought I could trust. My father, for all his charm and generosity in public, always had a strict code of loyalty and expectation. A code I tried to follow, yet somehow failed. My mother left when I was young, leaving gaps I filled with ambition, striving to be perfect at work, to be loved in ways that were conditional and quiet. My colleagues at the firm treat me with a mixture of respect and envy. Some smile too easily, offering help while watching for mistakes. I see it in their eyes. I have learned to read people as a survival skill. David, my husband, is my anchor and sometimes my mirror. He sees my ambition and worries about my stubbornness. He reminds me that some battles are not worth fighting, but I cannot stop. I think about my younger brother, Liam, who always seemed favored, the golden child in our father's eyes. Every compliment for him felt like a shadow over me. A subtle but persistent reminder that I had to prove my worth. I cannot help but wonder if this inheritance issue is just another way to assert control, to remind me of my place. I think of my best friend, Jenna, who has been my confidant since college. Her encouragement is a balm. Yet even she questions my choices, suggesting caution. I love her for honesty, but sometimes it feels like doubt itself seeps into my life. My mind drifts to my work relationships, the way I was passed over for the promotion I earned, the whispers of office politics, the favoritism that is always just out of reach. I realize that patterns repeat, at home and at work. The same obstacles, and it makes me wonder if people love me for who I am or for what I can offer. I see now that my father's actions are part of a larger tapestry, threads of past mistakes and ambitions, threads I did not always notice until now. I remember confrontations that felt minor, words that seemed casual, hints of resentment buried under smiles and celebrations. The inheritance is just a symptom. The real tension has always been about recognition, respect, and trust, and now it is glaringly exposed. As I sip my coffee and stare at the skyline from my apartment, I feel both melancholy and determination. I know that how I handle these relationships will shape what comes next. The alliances I nurture, the words I choose, the actions I take. They all matter more than ever. I cannot rely on assumptions or old patterns. And yet, even as I plan, I feel the subtle tremor of betrayal around me. I sense that not everyone is who they seem. And the next choice I make could reveal hidden motives. Or it could draw me further into conflict. The quiet tension is suffocating, a reminder that love, loyalty, and ambition are fragile. I breathe deeply, knowing I must navigate this carefully. That one wrong step could undo years of effort, and as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the room, I feel a shiver of anticipation, realizing that the people I trust and the people I doubt may collide in ways that will change everything, leaving me to question not just what is mine, but who I really can rely on. The day began with what I thought was a routine meeting, but within minutes I realized I was walking into a trap. My colleague, Mark, always smiling too much, had quietly gathered support against me for the upcoming project. Emails I never saw, approvals I thought were mine, quietly redirected. I felt the cold shock of betrayal crawl up my spine. David tried to calm me over the phone, reminding me to think logically. But logic felt useless against the gut punch of deceit. I could not understand how loyalty had dissolved overnight. My father's words about my inheritance echoed in my mind, like a warning I had ignored. And now I wondered if this was connected, if the blockage of what was rightfully mine had emboldened others. I returned to my office, eyes scanning the room for clues. Whispers seemed louder than normal. I overheard fragments of conversations, subtle but pointed. I realized that my past efforts to help colleagues had been twisted into opportunities for them to undermine me. The betrayal stung because I had trusted. Because I had extended a hand in what I thought was mutual respect. My internal conflict spiraled. Anger against the injustice, guilt for letting my guard down, fear that every relationship I thought stable was fragile, and then my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The text was simple, telling me to reconsider my approach if I wanted to survive this. I did not know who had sent it, whether friend or foe, and the doubt gnawed at me. In the middle of the day, I found myself alone in the conference room, replaying every interaction, trying to decipher who was sincere and who was playing a hidden game. My father's lawyer called with another update, emphasizing legal obstacles I had not anticipated. The complexity of the situation weighed on me. I felt cornered, my options narrowing, and yet, I could not accept surrender. I knew that fighting meant risking more than just money. It meant risking reputation, relationships, and the fragile trust I had built over years. I thought of David, of Jenna, of my brother, and wondered how many of them truly stood with me. The weight of moral dilemma pressed down. Do I confront openly and risk escalation, or maneuver silently and gather proof? Every choice seemed dangerous. Every inaction felt like consent to betrayal. As the day turned into evening, I returned home, exhausted but restless, my mind refusing to quiet. I sensed someone watching, a presence outside the window that vanished when I looked. The adrenaline mixed with fear made my heart pound. I realized that what started as a legal problem had become a test of character and courage, of how much I could endure without breaking. The unresolved tension filled every corner of my apartment. I could feel it in the silence. A storm gathering on the horizon, and just as I began to consider my next step, my phone rang again, this time with a familiar number. But the voice on the other end was not David, not Jenna, not my father. It was someone claiming knowledge that could change everything. Someone who could either help or destroy me. And as I held the phone, the choice I make in the next moment would determine everything, leaving me frozen, caught between trust and fear, between action and hesitation, knowing that once I move, there is no turning back. I thought I had prepared for every possibility, but the consequences of my choices hit harder than I imagined. My attempt to gather evidence quietly turned into a storm of suspicion. Colleagues who once seemed neutral began avoiding me, whispering in hallways, sending emails I could not read fast enough. David warned me that the stress was wearing me down, but I could not stop. Every step I took seemed to stir hidden traps. I discovered that my brother, Liam, had been leaking information to my father's allies. His smile had always masked ambition and resentment. The realization crushed me. I felt anger and betrayal rise at once. My father called that evening, not with an apology, but with a warning, reminding me that family loyalty is tested when stakes are high. I wanted to argue, but the weight of potential loss held my tongue. I started to question every decision. The ethical dilemmas became sharper. Should I manipulate situations to protect my claim, or remain above reproach and risk losing everything? I hated that fear dictated my thoughts, yet I could not ignore it. My finances, Already tangled with investments my father controlled, felt fragile. Every conversation I had now carried hidden risk. Even Jenna, my closest friend, seemed uncertain, asking if I was overreacting. And I realized that trust was a luxury I could not afford. The pressure of secrecy weighed heavily. I began tracking meetings, recording conversations, noting subtle cues that others might dismiss. I had become both investigator and prey. Constantly watching, constantly doubting. The adrenaline fueled late nights and restless mornings. I felt my body tightening under strain. The apartment that once felt safe now seemed like a trap. Shadows moving with the sunset, marking the passage of time I could not waste. David grew quiet, his concern evident, yet I knew he feared becoming a target too. I thought about confrontation, but every move had consequences. My reputation, the fragile image I had built at work, could crumble with a single misstep. As I stared at the city skyline through rain-slicked windows, I realized that the legal battle was only a fraction of what I was fighting. Manipulation, hidden alliances, subtle sabotage. These were the real enemies, and I felt the walls closing in. The line between ally and adversary blurred. I had to act decisively, yet prudently. I reached for my phone to call someone who might provide clarity. My hand shook, knowing that every call could reveal my intentions or betray my desperation. Just as I was about to dial, the lights flickered, plunging the room into brief darkness. A sound outside the door froze me in place. My mind raced, heart hammering. I had no idea if it was someone coming to warn me, someone spying, or someone ready to strike. The tension wrapped around me like steel, and I realized that the escalation I had tried to control had grown beyond me, leaving my next move to chance, hope, and courage. As the shadows deepened, I had to decide whether to step into the unknown or risk everything slipping through my fingers. I thought I had uncovered every secret, every betrayal, every hidden hand working against me. But the truth hit like a thunderclap, leaving me stunned and shaking. As I sifted through a folder of old documents my father had forgotten to return, I found a series of letters, meticulously written, revealing that the reason my inheritance was blocked was not just my unregistered marriage. It was something far deeper, something I had never imagined. The letters showed that my father had always intended for me to face this challenge. That my father had manipulated events, not out of cruelty, but because he believed I was not ready to carry the responsibility. He had tested my judgment, my resilience, and even my ability to navigate betrayal. My heart sank, a mix of relief, anger, and disbelief coursing through me. I realized that Liam had been acting on instructions, not purely out of ambition. Every subtle move, every whisper, had been part of a lesson I was forced to learn the hard way. David, who had stood quietly at my side, suddenly felt even more essential. Yet I could not shake the sting of how alone I had felt. The manipulation cut deep. Because it had worked, I had doubted myself, questioned my choices, my friends, my instincts, and yet, looking at the letters, I understood the intention. My father wanted to see if I could endure pressure without losing integrity, if I could act decisively when stakes were high. I felt the weight of years of misunderstanding, the frustration of being underestimated. Yet beneath it all, a strange sense of clarity began to form. I could see the patterns, the subtle lessons embedded in betrayals, in blocked inheritance, in professional sabotage. It was all a test, and I had survived. But survival came with a price. The trust I once had was fragile. My relationships now carried the imprint of suspicion. Even love felt measured. The letters hinted at more challenges ahead, more tests. The journey was far from over. And just as I processed this, my phone vibrated with a new message, simple and cryptic, telling me to meet at a location I did not recognize. The tone was urgent, familiar, yet unnerving. I felt the familiar adrenaline, the tension of unknown risks. My mind raced. Could it be another test, or a real threat? I knew that stepping into this next phase required courage, judgment, and strategy. The twist of my father's plan reframed everything I thought I knew. It forced me to reconsider my alliances, my actions, my understanding of loyalty and manipulation. And yet, even as I held the letters in my hand, I felt the uncertainty tighten around me. The suspense of what was to come, unrelenting. I realized that the story was far from finished, that the revelations were only the beginning, and as I stepped toward the door, phone in hand, heart pounding, I understood that the next choice could change everything. The past, the present, and the inheritance that had set this all in motion, leaving me poised on the edge of truth, uncertainty, and the next great challenge. I stood at the edge of the decision, letters in one hand, phone in the other. The rain outside hitting the windows like a drumbeat to my racing heart. Every option felt heavy with consequence. If I pursued the inheritance aggressively, I risked alienating my father. fracturing what remained of our family, and turning allies into enemies. Yet if I stepped back, I could lose years of work, trust, and the life I had envisioned. David watched silently, his eyes full of support and quiet warning. I realized that my choice would test not just my resolve, but my moral compass. The pressure of what I had uncovered, the manipulations and betrayals pressed down. Yet, amid the chaos, a clarity emerged. I could use the letters to confront my father directly, expose the hidden motives, demand fairness. But I would do so on my terms, measured, thoughtful, and principled. I could act with integrity even in a battle that had already been personal. I imagined the conversations, the risks of escalation, the potential for damage, but also the chance to finally reclaim control over my life. To prove that I was capable, decisive, and resilient, the internal debate raged as I paced the apartment, weighing trust, loyalty, and justice. I thought of Liam, who would be caught in the crossfire, David, who deserved peace, and Jenna, whose advice had been steady and unwavering. I understood that the path I chose would ripple through all these lives. I could no longer rely on chance. I had to assert myself. I had to act, and in that moment, I made the decision to face my father directly, present the evidence, assert my rights, and do so without compromise. I knew there would be resistance, perhaps anger, perhaps attempts to manipulate the outcome further. Yet I felt a sense of empowerment, a rare clarity that comes when you stop fearing every shadow and start trusting your judgment. I took a deep breath, sent a brief message to David and Jenna, explaining my plan, and prepared for the confrontation. My body tense with anticipation, heart pounding, the weight of history, loyalty, and ambition all converging in a single choice. As I stepped toward the door, letters neatly folded, my phone tucked safely, I felt the first spark of resolve that I had not known I possessed. I knew consequences would follow, perhaps positive, perhaps painful, but I would meet them head-on, and as I opened the door and felt the cool evening air against my skin, I realized that the story was still unfolding, that victory and defeat were intertwined, and that no matter the outcome, the decision I had made was mine, bold, deliberate, and irreversible. And in that moment, I understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. And with each step toward my father's office, each heartbeat marked by resolve and apprehension, I was ready to face the climax of a journey that had tested my patience, my trust, and my very sense of self, knowing that the resolution, whatever it might be, would define the next chapter of my life. After the confrontation, after the letters were laid bare, and after every tense conversation had run its course, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The storm that had consumed months of my life began to settle into quiet understanding. My father, while stern and exacting, admitted the errors in timing and approach, and I realized that the inheritance was never just about money. It was a test of resilience, patience, and discernment. David stood beside me, steady as ever, his support no longer just comforting but a reminder of how trust can anchor even the most turbulent moments. Liam and I talked, cautiously at first, about loyalty, choices, and the ways we misread each other. And while the past could not be undone, bridges could be rebuilt. I thought of Jenna and the quiet advice she had offered, reminding me that clarity often comes from listening, and I understood how vital it is to balance ambition with integrity. The professional setbacks, the betrayals at work, they still stung, but I now recognized them as opportunities to grow, to set boundaries, and to see the intentions behind actions that once felt purely malicious. I realized that the moral of my journey was not just about claiming what is rightfully mine, but about knowing when to act, when to hold back, and when courage must meet prudence. I learned that family and relationships carry complexities that cannot be solved with force alone, that love, loyalty, and respect must be earned and understood, not assumed. As I sat in my apartment, the city lights twinkling below, I reflected on the tension I had endured, the ethical dilemmas I had faced, and the moments of doubt that had tested my resolve. I understood that life is rarely a straight path, that lessons come in forms that challenge patience, humility, and perspective, and that every choice, every confrontation, carries ripple effects far beyond immediate outcomes. I asked myself quietly, what would I have done differently? And I realized that the only answer is to trust in my judgment while remaining open to learning. I want viewers to think about the same question. What would you have done in my place? How would you balance loyalty, ambition, and justice? Because life often demands choices that test character in ways we cannot predict, and it is through these tests that we discover who we truly are. The inheritance, the betrayals, the twists and manipulations, they are all part of a larger lesson about resilience, responsibility, and the subtle art of navigating trust. And as I finally closed the folder of letters, I felt a calm resolve, a sense of completion, and the quiet joy that comes from facing challenges with courage and emerging with understanding. Life continues with its uncertainties, but I now know that clarity comes from reflection, courage comes from choice, and integrity comes from action. And I hope that anyone who hears my story can take something meaningful away, a reminder that even in the most complicated trials, we have the power to shape our path, to learn, and to grow.